Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. England's 5-test series against India is just over a week away. We'll continue to preview that series this morning. We're looking back at the Bazball era so far as well. Does it have a chance in India? I'm Yas Rana, and with me today, Lawrence Booth, the co-author of the new book, Bazball, the inside story of a Test cricket revolution. We've also got Phil Walker and Will Macpherson. Mark Butcher will be joining us later in the show. We've also got a fair bit of franchise and county championship chat to get through. As we speak, the training marquee at the Oval is being put up. It might be -3 outside, but the county season is only 80 days away from starting.
Bring it on.
Lawrence, great to have you with us. So you've co-authored this book with The Telegraph's Nick Holt. You spoke to pretty much everyone involved at the heart of the Stokes McCullum story. I suppose you're as qualified as anyone then to answer this question. What is Bazball?
It's a mindset, really. It's an attempt, a device by McCullum and Stokes to free up the players, to remove the fear of failure, which is go down the decades or centuries is the holy grail in any sport, and therefore to encourage the best out of them. But it's a change of mindset. It's no more than that. But with both bat and ball, it's not just slogging. And the results are there to be seen. 1 win out of 17. Leading up to Joe Root's resignation, and 13 wins out of 18 since then, with thrilling cricket, incredible run rate, 1 defeat by 1 run, 1 defeat by 2 wickets, a scandalous draw at Old Trafford when rain robbed England possibly of the greatest Ashes comeback in all time. So it's all there in the book, hopefully.
When you see talk around the preparation for the India tour, for example, they're not playing any warm-up games, they're just having a nice week together in Abu Dhabi. How much, when you look back at the last 2 years of it, is actually that they place so much importance on sort of creating an environment that's conducive to the sort of cricket they want to play. And, we saw at the World Cup, for example, that you can't just tell players to play fearless cricket. You've got to create an environment where that comes naturally to play. So when you see England's preparations through that lens, does it sort of make a little bit more sense to you? Because a lot of people have been angry at the lack of match practice before the series.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, first of all, overseas tours are completely different from what they used to be. There are no warm-up games, basically. And teams have grown suspicious of the conditions that host nations will lay on for them for warm-up matches. So they've decided to take those matters into their own hands. But yeah, this happened before the Ashes last summer. I mean, they went up to Scotland and drank some whiskey and played golf. And that was essentially their warm-up. In fact, that's where they cooked up the plan for Harry Brook to bowl to Steve Smith at Edgbaston. That was done over a few beers in Scotland. So this is what they do. And let's be honest, so far it's worked pretty well. Now, clearly there are people waiting for it to come crashing down. And that may well happen in India, because overseas teams do not do well in India. Since Alistair Cook's England side won there over a decade ago, India have lost 3 test matches. Forget series. They've lost 3 test matches out of 46 at home. If you include one-off tests, they've won 16 home series in a row since then. They even beat Australia, who won pretty well everything else in 2023. So losing in India won't negate the good work that Bazball has done. If they lose 5-0 and collapse in a heap 10 times, that will be interesting. And yet, coming up in the English summer are 2 series you'd expect them to win: West Indies and Sri Lanka. Then they go to Pakistan and New Zealand, where they've enjoyed recent success. And it's all then about the build-up to the 25-26 Ashes. So it might work in India. They've got a better chance of winning in India playing this style of cricket than they have playing the style of cricket on their last 2 tours, when they lost 7 out of 9, drew 1. So give it a go. It's worked well so far, and it may make India think about their cricket, which they haven't had to do much at home, let's face it. They just produce turning tracks, and Ashwin and Jadeja go to town, and Rohit Sharma plays a great innings at some point, and they thrash all comers. So it'll be something a bit different.
Phil, do you think England have got a chance at all?
I always end up doing this. I look at the squad that's announced, and then there's this sort of collective shrug and a sigh and a weary resignation. And then the nearer I get to the first game, the more I start concocting these wild narratives in my head, which lead me to think that if there's something, the savage madness of the Stokes era is that you just don't know, do you? You just don't know with them. But I think what Lawrence says, that they stand a better chance of breaking the stranglehold, playing the way that they are going to play, than playing safety first, hang in there attritional cricket, which has never worked. It worked for 3 or 4 days in a weirdly conventional test match, 3 years ago at Chennai, on a flattish one where England won the toss. Root played a masterclass, but that game terrified the Indian brains trust so much that then they prepared these kind of, ragging turners thereafter, and that series then descended a bit, really became a bit of a crapshoot by the end of it. But whether they are flat tracks akin to Pakistan last winter when everyone said, well, Bazball's going to come unstuck, and they outwhacked Pakistan and won 3-0, or if they are turning tracks, which on the one hand brings through the spinners, the superior spinners on the Indian side, but on the other, perhaps levels the playing field because it makes it slightly more of a lottery. I'm not predicting an Ahmedabad pitch as we saw 3 years ago when Joe Root took 5 for 8 on the second morning, I think it was. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite predicting that. But if they are going to be pitches like that, then you fall down on one or two outstanding individual performances. A brilliant 70 from number 6 from a Brook or a whoever might actually swing a test match if you're playing 150 against 180. I think they'll take one or two off them. I do. I think India will win the series, but I don't think it will be a straight 5-0 by any means. And I think it'll be worth watching. The beauty of this Stokes team is that nobody knows.
Mm. I think one of the most fascinating parts of England under Stokes and McCullum is their ability to take 20 wickets pretty much every time they play in whatever conditions. And I know that they won in 2021 on the flattest pitch in that series, but I almost worry for England more with the squad they've picked and the makeup of that squad if the pitches are flatter than they were in 2021. I mean, that test, India weren't actually at full strength. I was looking back at the scorecard the other day. I think Shabaz Nadeem was playing that test match. Will, do you worry that if the pitches are more 2016 than 2021, that England it might be really tough for England? This would be England's toughest challenge as a bowling unit as much as anything else.
Definitely worry about that. Equally, I don't think they are going to be 2016 pitches. I personally think India should play England on decent pitches, not turning from ball one of a game kind of pitches. I know there's a bit of discourse around this kind of stuff at the moment. Sonny Gavaskar's getting excited again. But I think India will be good enough to beat England on a good surface and wear them down. Whereas I think that, Jack Leach or Tom Hartley or someone like that could end up causing quite a lot of trouble if it's just a shootout. And as Phil says, if you've got 60 or 70 being a game-defining score, 180 being a good innings score, that kind of thing, I think that brings England into it massively. All of the, talking to people around the England camp, they are not expecting anything other than
ragging turners.
Raging turners. Yeah, it's going to be, that's what they're expecting. That's what they've picked the squad for. I think the interesting thing about the squad is that the only person you'd call an all-rounder at test level is Joe Root. Rayan Ahmed is not there yet with his batting. But England, Stokes is not going to bowl. Shumi's going to play, but that's the first selection question England have to answer. Probably it'll be this weekend by the time we really start thinking about that. But will Stokes play? He's not going to bowl. Certainly not in the early part of the series, and I wouldn't think at any stage. Livingston and Jacks were part of the team in Pakistan. Livingston, admittedly, for not very long at all. But, there was an all-round presence in that team, and Stokes was bowling at that point as well. So they haven't gone with that this time. Root's the only player I'd call an all-rounder. And so they're going to... I would expect them to pick 4 bowlers at the bottom of the team, plus Root.
Yeah, agreed.
That's a thin attack, but we'll see.
But Root's components, all right, he drags them down. He's not a frontline bowler, obviously, because he bowls too many bad balls. But his good balls are perfect for those kinds of conditions if we anticipate those conditions to be as they will be. And he's shown out there, not just on that freakish morning, but he's shown that he's a wicket taker. And he will. My prediction is that he will bowl more overs than any of England's support spinners. The other one that I would look at, I think, is Hartley. I think he has a chance. I'm not expecting Rayan Ahmed to play that much because traditional wrist spinners in India don't tend to go that well in 5-day cricket historically. He's obviously a really good young talent and did really well in Pakistan. He might come in if they have to force a result somehow, come in perhaps as a 5th, 6th bowler type thing. But I think Hartley might have something to say in the series. They've certainly picked him with that view. But it's a hell of a lot of pressure on Leach's shoulders, right? He didn't play throughout that test series.
Hasn't played since the Ireland test.
Yes, hasn't played since June or whatever it was, June.
There's a load of them like that. Pope hasn't played since Lords. Anderson hasn't played since the Oval. Robinson hasn't played since Headingley, where he kind of limped out of the series, where he made quite a lot of noise at the start, and then a bit like his first Ashes series. That's 4 players who you'd think are going to have a reasonable role to play. I just haven't played any cricket for better part of 6 months, I guess.
Who keeps wicket, Lawrence?
Well, it'll be Bairstow. I mean, unfortunately, there's no room for folks in this setup if they want to squeeze enough spinners in. I mean, I think on the pitch is an interesting question. I agree with Will that really India, if they were sort of assessing it from the start with no cultural baggage on either side, they would produce flat pitches. But it's almost become a point of pride for them that they're not going to be dissuaded from producing turning tracks by the moanings of the Western cricket nations. I mean, you saw what Rohit Sharma said after the Cape Town test recently when he said everyone coming to India should shut their mouth about the pitches. I think we know what's coming. And I think, and by the way, home advantage isn't an issue for me in Test cricket. Where it becomes a problem is it goes so far that things become a lottery, as Phil mentioned earlier. And actually, that's where India could shoot themselves in the foot. They did it in 2012-13. They won on a flat pitch at Ahmedabad, and we thought England have got no hope here. And then, hey presto, they produced spinning tracks which brought Swan and Panesar into play, who outbowled Ashwin and Jadeja, I think, was around at the time. They're just coming into it. So England's one hope, I think, is India get themselves into a muddle about the pitches, which they did in the World Cup. You know, they got themselves into a muddle ahead of the final when they underprepared that pitch deliberately. They should have produced a flat one, which would have put less emphasis on the importance of the toss. So they can get themselves into muddle because they get very angry about criticism from the outside. Will mentioned Gavaskar earlier. You know, that he is almost a spokesman for that quite extreme way of thinking. Now, if he's representing what's going on in Indian dressing room, maybe there's something England could grab onto there.
Yeah, and I think the series between India and Australia early this year is quite interesting because Australia turned up and I think they were a little bit muddled. I think it was the first test match where they just tried to sweep absolutely everything and collapse in a heap. But then by the third test match with Murphy and Kuhneman, both of whom had barely played first-class cricket, let alone test cricket, on a pitch that spun loads, Australia won that test match. And actually, it was only a really flat pitch in the last test match that sort of confirmed the India series win. I guess going back to Bazball more generally, one of the themes throughout it, the 2 years so far, is just the weirdness of what other teams do in response to it. Especially, I remember the New Zealand series in 2022, just New Zealand just doing weird things in the third innings. You know, talked a lot about the rattled Ashes this summer. But why do you think teams sort of get a little bit, their minds are scrambled a little bit by England's unpredictability?
Yeah, I think so. We saw it right from the start of the Ashes. Cummins sets a deep point for the very first ball, and there's lots of chat about how un-Australian this is. And of course, Crawley famously whacks it through the covers. Now, that isn't happening if England are approaching the series in a conventional manner. I think the New Zealand series is an interesting one. They had the edge in most of those games. They were in 2 or 3 of the games, they were 250 ahead with about 5 wickets to fall in the third innings. They basically won the game. And they weren't quite sure how to adapt. It happened with India at Edgbaston. They made 250. They had a big lead first innings, 130. Weren't quite sure what a good target was or what was a safe target because these English maniacs, are going to go for anything. They ended up sort of neither here nor there, 250 all out, and England whacked 378 for 3, could have chased 500. So I do think this England team are making other sides think about how they're going to play. And that's clearly an advantage. If you're thinking about your opponents, how many press conferences have we been to where you ask Ben Stokes whether about the opponents, we're just concentrating on our own game. Bazball England don't give the opposition that luxury. And again, that's another little thing they can possibly grab onto going into this series.
We're talking before we started recording about the TV show Ted Lasso. So I've just started watching it, and Will said you've watched it. And Phil, have you watched it?
No.
But it came out in 2020, so 2 years before McCullum took the role. And it is strikingly similar to McCullum's approach to coaching. So this is a quote that is from McCullum, but could easily be from Ted Lasso. But the real fun for us is working with the guys. building those relationships, getting to know them as people, getting to know their wives, their kids, and what their life is like, and then working with their skills, and then whatever happens on the field it's almost secondary. Well, is McCullum a sort of alpha Ted Lasso?
There is. Yeah, I can sort of see it. I mean, I think he's got a bit of I would say McCullum arrived in his job with a bit more pedigree in cricket than Ted Lasso did in football. But yeah, I mean, there's something about that. Certainly, the way I don't know, the pure focus on environment, complete obsession with environment. We were talking about the preparation for the series. The whole aim of going to Abu Dhabi rather than India, I think, is to try and help England last longer in this series, if you see what I mean. So they, rather than fading away, i.e., so you arrive in, if you look at I'm going to India on Monday, which is about when England arrived there. I think they maybe arrive on Sunday. I'm there for 7 weeks. It's quite a long time. If they'd gone 2 weeks before, that's 9 weeks. It's quite a long time away from home, and they talk about India they're a bit more hotel bound in India than some other parts of the world. I mean, 9 weeks in Australia, they've probably got a bit more freedom than they do in India. So go to Abu Dhabi, go to the facility. It was a good piece of a mail by Paul Newman a couple of days ago about the kind of how state of the art this place is, and they kind of rough up the pitches, and they sort of prepare what they expect to face, rather than allowing, as Lawrence said earlier, allowing the home board to provide them with with some quite substandard opposition. And then they do the things they like to do at ease. Essentially, they go out to these expensive restaurants, and they leave the hotel, and they play quite a lot of golf as well. All those kind of things. And the aim, I think, is to make them, by the time they're 5 weeks into the tour, they're not feeling 7 weeks into the tour and all that kind of stuff. I think that the 2021 tour is very interesting. Obviously, that happened in deepest, darkest lockdown, and India was obviously dreadfully affected by the pandemic at that time too. But England went to Chennai and Ahmedabad, and the Ahmedabad leg. Players still talk about how it was quite a bleak time. I think they were in a modest hotel by their standards. I don't want to, give them too much benefit here, but like, they're in a modest hotel by their standards. I think COVID restrictions maybe meant that India had a slightly nicer part of that quite modest hotel, and then they were kind of in the next rung down as the tourists, which is fine. But it was a long couple of weeks, and you might remember a couple of slightly strange things happened around that tour. Rory Burns fired off that tweet about Alex Hartley, and just they behaved a bit like a completely rattled group of people, basically. And I think they were, and I think that that tour looms quite large in their memories. So they're trying to, obviously it will be quite different this time. They're going to 5 different venues. They're not going to stay 2-3 weeks in any one hotel. But I think that for some of them, that's their last memory of a test tour in India. It's all of their last memory of test tour, but some of it's their last memory of visiting India altogether. So they're trying to change the narrative a little bit in their minds. They know how tough the series can be on the field. They're trying to lighten it up. It's a lovely idea. We'll see if it works. They've obviously copped quite a lot of, I think, pretty fair criticism for not playing any warm-up cricket. But as Lawrence says, you see so little of it around the world these days.
It's pretty much the norm. I mean, India played a warm-up game or two before they came here for the World Test Championship final before. But like, it's really, England haven't played a first-class game before an overseas tour, I think, for 4 years now. Yeah, so it's not something that's specific.
It was something that was dying, and then the pandemic killed off.
Yeah,
basically.
I remember before the Ashes, we were, it's something to talk about, isn't it? And we were questioning the merits or the smartness of Root sitting on the bench for whoever it was, Rajasthan, for a couple of months rather than playing some cricket, and came back and didn't really have a bat before that first test match, and then just strummed a stunning under on day one, and that kind of just finishes that conversation, really. As Lawrence says, the game has moved on now, and so we can wring our hands, but our hands are dry, let's be honest. There's not too much on this, really.
I think you mentioned Ted Lasso, and I must go and watch it now. Perhaps an extra chapter in the book when we do a reprint. But Bazball is a confidence trick, basically. It's somehow persuading the players that it doesn't matter. And the only way you can do that is to stick to the message. Now, I think one of the issues at the World Cup was that the messaging, if you want to use that phrase, was inconsistent. You know, he had Matthew Mott admitting before the South Africa game in Mumbai that the confidence was low. Now, Owen Morgan would never have admitted to that when he was one-day captain. In fact, he was out there. I had a beer with him one night, and he was, rolling his eyes at that particular comment, because he couldn't believe. He said, no matter what's going on behind the scenes, you don't let the light in. You don't give the opposition a chance to latch on to something. And Bazball, Stokes and McCullum are brilliant at that. They stick to their message. If England collapse in a heap twice in the first test in India, they will not waver from their plans. England were 2-0 down in the Ashes, and Stokes says it's a perfect place to be. McCullum says on the outfield at Lord's 3-2 has a nice ring to it. This is outrageous stuff. You get no previous England coach saying that, and he came very close to being proved correct. So consistent messaging is what they do brilliantly.
I mean, you're right one of the things in the book's quite interesting is at the end you've got the list of stats and how dramatically the personal numbers have changed for pretty much everyone involved in Bazball. Obviously, they went from 1 win in 17 to that great winning streak as soon as Stokes and McCullum joined. But there are a lot of people who don't like Bazball, particularly people outside of the UK. Even within English cricket, there's almost a sense from some sections that there's almost wanting them to fail a little bit. Why do you think
half my mates can't stand it?
Why do you think that is?
Because they think it's hubristic, and they think there's certain fundamentals that they've always held dear as real cricket fans.
Yeah,
that are being inverted and dismissed in a rather sort of haughty and highfalutin way. I think that's why they don't like it. They want to see their understanding of the game be repeated rather than dismantled. And I think there's a kind of like a crusty element to it as well. Well, I'm sorry, don't take the piss out of Mother Cricket and all of that, and what they're seeing, friends of mine, is a kind of an extension of the arrogance that is at the heart of it. And sporting arrogance is generally good arrogance, as we know. But that can tip over. And when you're 2-0 down at home in the Ashes, and there's certain decisions that were made declaring on day one of an Ashes test match, then there's certain people that feel morally, ethically offended by that. Don't take the piss out of the game. But what they're really doing, of course, is daring to stretch the boundaries of how we define what the game is. And there's a difference there.
I've said this before in the pod. I think the tour of Pakistan changed their attitude a little bit. They were extremely successful in these quite extreme conditions. But they were also against almost historically weak Pakistan bowling attack. And actually, since Pakistan, I think you can fairly accuse them of going too far at times. They did lose that test match at Wellington when they should have absolutely bossed it. They were 2-0 down in the Ashes, and I know Root started that series pretty well, but a couple of the bowlers have said it would have been nice to have some overs under their belt before the first test match. So I think it is interesting because that is now a year where they haven't played that much test cricket and they have done very well. I guess the counter to that is that certain individuals have completely transformed in that time. Crawley and Pope, etc.
Can I ask you, Lawrence, when you were putting the book together, did you find an echo of that attitude with certain people that you were talking to? Not necessarily, obviously, in the inner sanctum because they've all drunk the Kool-Aid, but outside of it, observing.
Yeah, but I've sensed that all the way through.
Yeah.
People were very quick to turn on England after the Stokes declaration when it went wrong. Some people in the press were writing.
I threw an iPad in the Mediterranean at that point. I was watching it. It's another story.
People were looking for them to fail, and I think, as you say, I think Test cricket means something. It's in your bones, isn't it? In England, especially, you think it should be played a certain way, and people did feel offended. I think they didn't like the fact that numbers 1 to 7 all play the same way effectively. Well, they've lost the variety of the openers taking the shine off the new ball, a bit of counter-attacking. Root's perhaps the only one who's not, he's got his ramps and so on, but the others are all going at it. And I think that offends people. I think there's also, so that's England, the English response taken care of. The overseas response is interesting too. I don't think overseas cricket fans and teams like it when England are leading the way in a revolution, because they've often felt hectored by England, lectured, told that cricket should be played a certain way, that, the whole run out at the non-strikers end business, that particularly gets their goat. So when England come out and start saying we're trying to save Test cricket, even though Stokes has been quite careful not to say that explicitly, but you see the headlines, that winds people up. They don't want to see England being the pack leaders. There, I remember once seeing, I think it was Telford Vice, South African cricket journalist, describing England as no one's favourite second team, and I think that does sum up the way they're regarded generally around the world. Arrogance is the old noun that's thrown at English sporting sides, so that fits in nicely with what they think Bazball are doing. But actually, it's not arrogant. It's just trying to remove doubt, and they can't let any doubt into the mechanism if it's going to succeed.
You wrote a nice thing for the magazine on Dean Elgar, who obviously played that masterpiece before then, hanging up his pads after maybe 180 odd or whatever it was, that first test against India. And he was very vocal, wasn't he, last year as the focal point of that South African side. And again, there is that sense of being offended, being morally offended, as if Dean Elgar has spent his life committed to the principles of Test match cricket. And then when you see these sort of bumptious show-offs with tattoos all the way up their arms, you know, playing golf before nets and then smashing it from ball one, that goes right to the heart of who you are, right? It goes to your heart, to the heart of your own identity as a cricketer and as a bloke. And so it's natural, I guess, that you get that kind of response, that resistance to it. But then that's also playing into their hands, right? That's exactly what they're looking to do.
On the narrative of saving Test cricket, I think from overseas, if you're from the smaller 9 4-member countries, that might come across as quite naive as well. I don't know exactly where that narrative originates from, but it's not just that people find Test cricket a bit dull. It's the players aren't paid much.
Yeah, I mean, that whole saving Test cricket, I think that's a sort of an happy accidental spin-off from what England are doing. Look, what they're doing is they're trying to win more games. Let's not, be in any doubt about this. Their primary focus is to win more games of Test cricket. It so happens that their best route to that is to play more entertaining cricket, and as a function of that, you can then say, oh, you know what, this might be a way to help the ailing red ball game. I mean, Pakistan started to score more quickly against Sri Lanka last year. They had these practice session where they couldn't play more than 2 dot balls in a row. They played a third, they were out. And they scored at 5 and over in Galle against Sri Lanka. And they're calling it the Pakistan way. They're obviously not going to call it Bazball. But that was a clear consequence of losing 3-0 at home to England and seeing how England had played. The problem is that India and Australia are never going to copy what England do. India don't need to because they're so dominant in home conditions. And they've won their last 2 series in Australia, by the way, so they've had a couple of good results on the road. Australia don't need to. I would argue Australia are quite a dull team to watch. They play quite percentage cricket. If you get Smith and Labuschagne in, Pakistan all out for 200 and Australia are 180 for 2 and there's 3.5 days to go. You're not in for the most thrilling match. And Australia win everything at home now in a not very exciting way. And I know that winds Australians up to make the point, but there was no doubt last summer which of the 2 teams was the more watchable. It was they almost went in opposite directions as the series progressed. Usman Khawaja got slower and slower. Brilliant though he was. Australia became the anti-Bazball. Labuschagne here, 9 off 82 balls. So it's interesting. I don't think England are going to save Test cricket. It may be a little blip, a sort of dead cat bounce at the end, but let's enjoy it while it lasts.
Back to the India series, Phil, you spoke to Tom Hartley for the upcoming magazine. He was bigging up his Karen ball. Do you think he plays that first test then?
I'm not sure if he plays the first. It will be pitch dependent, I suppose. But I think there's a decent chance. I think of the 3 support spinners, excluding Root, I think he's possibly at the front of the queue for the 3 because he's the most experienced. He's got a decent white ball pedigree. He has the physical components that they're looking for. He's an Aksar clone, as we all know. He's 6 foot and plenty, bowls left arm darts, etc., etc. So I can see him being perhaps a more sensible banker than the other 2. And I like what I heard from him. I only chatted to him for 20 minutes. I've never met him before, but there's a definite kind of confidence there without it being cocky. I asked him about a magic ball. First of all, he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Do you have a special ball, like a carom ball or something?" He said, "Yeah, I got a carom." He said, "Yeah, I bowled it in the nets and bowled it in a few white ball games. It's a question of of having the balls to do it in a red ball game. He said, but the way that they want us to play, I'll flip it out for you. Don't worry about that. And it was just a nicely phrased way of doing it. And in there is a recognition that whatever he is bringing to the table, it will be done fearlessly, liberatedly, Bazball-y. And I can see him playing a fairly big role in this series, despite the fact that he's played only 20 first-class games.
Alfie asked, what's happening with the TV rights for the upcoming test matches?
Question.
What do you think will happen? Will, I saw you on Twitter the other day saying that you're confident it will be on TV somehow.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah,
it will definitely be on TV.
Cool.
The fears of a blackout are they're just not going to happen. The rights, I don't know. It's difficult to talk about, but I think I might write a story today about where the rights will go.
Okay.
But so by the time the pod comes out, that might have happened. But
Cool.
the right, basically, in short, the reason why the rights will definitely be sold is because they're not being sold by a company in India. They've already been bought by a company in London, Pitch International, who work a lot with ECB. So they have spent money on them already, and they're not going to just let them sit there. Even if they make a loss on it, they're going to sell them. So I think they will be sold to one of the places where people watch England play cricket.
Cool.
Regularly.
India have named a 16-man squad for the first two tests of the series. Couple of uncapped players in there. The 22-year-old keeper Dhruv Jurel is there, and so is the seamer Avesh Khan, but they're both included as backups. Really, there are 4 spinners in the squad: Ashwin, Jadeja, Axar and Kuldeep, mirroring the composition of England's squad, I guess. And I think the inclusion of Jurel as backup keeper suggests that Barrett is likely to take the gloves, with Rahul, who scored 100 in the first test match against South Africa, moving up to either the top of the order or to number 3, meaning that one of Jaiswal or Gill is likely to make way. Phil, it's funny how quickly things can change for these precocious Indian batters. We saw it with Prithvi Shaw, test match 100 at 18, hasn't played a test match since I think he was 20. Gill looked like he was Kohli's all-format superstar successor in 2023, and now find himself outside of the T20 side and potentially the Test side as well.
Yeah. Excuse me. I've been a bit under the weather, yes. Yeah, staggering. I think he'll get another go at some point down the line. Although, you'd say that about any number of other great greenhorn players for India who drift away because there's just this relentless conveyor belt of talent coming through. I think he's a bit special though. And it's not unusual for a player who ends up becoming an all-timer to have a step away from the side. KL Rahul has to play somehow because that 100 in Centurion, first test match, that was a stunner. It was a real stunner when everyone else fell away for India. So he has to play. Adya Sharma, who is Wisden India stalwart, really writes for us and contributes to the magazine. He's wrote a brilliant thing for the current issue, which is out this week, about India's dream factory, if you like. The realities of being a young male Indian like wunderkind, right? A player who's promised the world at 15, 16.
India under-19 captain, that sort of thing.
This is it, yeah. And it's a piece about the psychology of young Indian cricketers. And it's quite a poignant human story as well. He interviewed Prithvi Shaw for the website a few months ago and went back to him and got some fresher quotes as well. And the Shaw story in particular is fascinating, just on a human level. He's 24 years old. He wore 100 on his back to win the Under-19s World Cup. He made a debut Test match 100 as a 19-year-old. Promised the world, opens in the IPL for 3 or 4 years, and then ends up at Wantage Road. You're up the road from you to rediscover his love for the game.
The
Lawrence.
pinnacle,
as many have, of course.
I was quite tempted to make him one of the Wisden 5 on the
I thought you might.
244. Have I just given the game away? No, he's a legend.
So he's perhaps the most obvious story of a sort of fallen angel, if you like.
Yeah.
But there's plenty others as well. And Adya really does get to the heart of it. In amongst it, he tells the incredible story of Jaiswal, which I didn't really know too much about. But Jaiswal was an 11-year-old living in a tent on one of the Maidans in Mumbai, thousands of miles from his parents, trying to make his way as a young cricketer to be recognised. And a coach got hold of him and became his legal guardian for the next few years, and then developed him to the player that we now see. But it's a brilliant article, this, because it's a mixture of origin stories, human stories, tales of rags to riches and riches to rags. And he really nails it. It's a superb piece of work. And the Jaiswal story, it's incomprehensible, really. And it's sort of reductive to take it back to say English stories, but we just don't have any equivalent of that whatsoever. And that story in itself demonstrates the scale of Indian cricket, the breadth of it, the vastness of it. And with that, of course, comes ever more, the stakes are so much higher, the jeopardy's so much more profound. And that's why it's the most thrilling place to develop your game and to watch the game, because it just works on a different level to everywhere else.
A few years ago, I did a piece about agents in cricket, and I managed to get to, I think it might have been Cricinfo, but I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But I managed to get to Cornerstone, which is the big Indian agency who have like Virat and Rohit, and they had picked out two really young players at the time, with Shreyas Iyer and Manan Vora, who were going to be their next two, who would take over from Kohli and Rohit and make them loads of money. But I saw over the Christmas period that there's obviously Iyer's done pretty well, and I've always kept an eye on Vora, who's kind of been in IPL squads, maybe played a few games. He's got an okay first-class record, but he's coming to England next summer to play club cricket to revive his career, I guess, or to keep himself busy at that time of year. I don't think he's got an IPL deal, all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of what Phil's talking about there, but you get anointed quite young in India, and you have to see how you go. And he's actually, I think he still averages 36 in first-class cricket, which is get him a gig here. But yeah, strange old business.
There's loads. Mentioned in Northants, Karen Nair,
who
made
a triple hundred.
Made a triple hundred. 5 minutes later, he's out the team, never to be seen again. And again, rocks up at Wantage Road, where hearts are repaired, clearly. Strums a stunning 100 here against Surrey towards the end of the season. And again, just another brilliant talent trying to rediscover their fundamental reason for why they like the thing in the first place.
Yeah. The Test series begins next Thursday. One announcement last week was that we're doing daily podcasts throughout the series. Another announcement this week is pod favourite from the summer, Ollie Robinson, is back. He'll be joining us at various points throughout the series. You'll be able to listen to him on the podcast or read his column on Wisden.com throughout the series. It's been a busy week in the franchise world. The BBL is coming towards the end of the group stage, and the SA20 has got going in South Africa. Matthew Jones asks, Happy New Year, everyone. Love the podcast. Always a highlight of the week to see that a new one has dropped. As a follow-up to the conversation a few weeks ago about England's T20 struggles at numbers 6 and 7, I wondered if the pod had any candidates to fill the role from outside of the current squad. My own vote would go to Jamie Overton, who's made great strides as a T20 player in 2023, striking at 169 in the Blast, winning the player of the series in the 100, and now having an excellent big bash with both bat and ball. It's a good question. Our video editor, Dan Senior, was doing some digging and saw that Overton has the highest batting strike rate in the history of T20 cricket, if you discount players who solely represent associate nations way down the international.
Excuse me. I've said that on this show at least 14 times. That is my stat.
That is your stat. I don't think you said it 4 times.
14. I've said it multiple times, and you're throwing it to Daniel, who's fine and brilliant, but I've had that one. I don't know stats, but I know that stat. You just let it go in one ear and out the other, don't you? I'm not going to bother anymore.
I don't think we should play the game of people not listening to other people on the podcast. I think that's a dangerous one to get into. But yeah, I mean, Jamie Overton, we were talking about Laurie Evans earlier. There are, franchises do just give opportunities to these guys to show how good they are away from international cricket. And, I'd be quite interested to see how a Jamie Overton or Laurie Evans does in T20I cricket.
Jamie Overton's a massive unit, isn't he? I mean, we know that both of them are big boys, but Jamie's kind of allowed himself to get really burly. And I remember when he first joined Surrey, I think it must have been 2020. The Gareth Batty was still playing, and I think he might have been captain of a T20 side then, but he was calling him Dre Russ of Surrey. And actually, that is sort of coming true a little bit. He absolutely waxed. He's been playing for an Adelaide Strikers team who I really enjoy their overseas players because they've just had Adam Hose, Jamie Overton and David Payne for the whole season. They're just three, they're just jobbing English pros. They're just Jason Gillespie's head coach, I think, and he's just gone to the Blast, which he obviously knows pretty well, and just got three lads who'll come for the whole thing. Yeah. Overton's been brilliant. I would be very open to a bolter at number 5, 6, 7 in England's T20 team for this year. This year's World Cup. I think Livingston doesn't always do it for me. Sam Curran kind of looks great, but doesn't work out. And I don't know, someone like Overton, who also offers with the ball, would be good fun, especially on some smallish grounds in the Caribbean and some pop-ups. They're actually not going to the USAM groups, are they? But he could be useful. I think Laurie Evans is amazing. He's 36. He's obviously had this curious situation with the drugs ban hanging over him, or I think it's still not totally resolved that. I don't quite understand it. But watching him this morning for Perth Scorchers, that was proper. Like, really, really good.
I mean, one of the issues at the 50 over World Cup in India was that England didn't refresh their team. They just trusted the old guys. Admitted as much. Moeen Ali said as much after the defeat by Australia, which finally knocked them out. There is a danger they will repeat that mistake in the Caribbean and the USA this summer. Go back to 2010. When Lum and Keyswetter got in at the last minute on the basis of a bit of a thrash in a warm-up game in the UAE. Try something different. I'd be all for Laurie Evans coming in. I mean, why not? Fresh blood was what they lacked in India. And please don't make that mistake again.
On franchise size based off English cricket, the Sunrisers Eastern Cape side is brilliant. It's basically pure Division 1 county championship. It's got Simon Harmer, Rossington, Liam Dawson and Dan Worrell. Those are 5 people who are right at the business end of Division 1, probably playing full seasons for all of them. Elsewhere in the BBL, Aaron Finch and Sean Marsh have both retired. Finch played his last game the other day, while Marsh, now 40, will play his final game of his career on Wednesday. And the SA20 has got going. I've personally loved it. Decent crowds, really good uncapped domestic players. You only have 6 teams, so the talent concentration is very strong. And their pool for overseas players is probably the second best in the world after the IPL. So really, really high class overseas players. One person who's been following it particularly closely is Mark Butcher, who's out there covering the tournament. Here's his view on the opening week of the competition. But you're out in South Africa. I've really enjoyed watching the SA20 from back home in the UK, where it's -3 degrees. It looks pretty fun to be out there at the moment. What have you made of the tournament so far?
Yeah, it's been great. Like most people, I've kept a cursory eye on it in its opening year. It's always that sort of morbid curiosity about how a new tournament is going to take off, and it looks as though it went very, very well last time round. And they're not struggling in year 2. The sophomore syndrome doesn't seem to have hit it at all. Maybe a slightly disappointing turnout on Monday night. So where are we now? Well, it's I'm talking to you on a Tuesday. This might be seen by people on a Wednesday, but Monday night at Durban wasn't the greatest crowd, but saw a fabulous innings from Heinrich Klaassen. The type of innings perhaps that people might have thought that he wasn't capable of playing. In terms of managing really difficult conditions and posting a total that his team were more than capable of defending. And the crowd was a little bit sketchy, but no less enthusiastic for it. I mean, the people have really taken to the new teams and to the idea of the identity that they carry with them. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And the pool of players is quite interesting because you have a very high quality domestic pool of players, but also the pool of overseas talent is probably only second to the IPL. From an English point of view, I think it's really interesting seeing like that group of players who do really well in the Blast, do really well in the 100, who don't yet play international cricket, get an opportunity to sort of show how good they are against some of the best T20 players in the world. You know, Tom Abel, Adam Rossington, Liam Dawson bowled a really good spell the other day, and it's quite interesting seeing how these players go at this level.
Yeah, you're right. You know, the blast, I suppose, you know, it's much maligned for many reasons, mainly because I think because of the pool of players being so wide and so large, and because of it being quite difficult to follow with multiple matches all happening on the same night, people kind of get a little bit of the wrong end of the stick as to how good the players are and how good the standard are in it. So when they come out of that, and as you say, they're not the international players that everybody would recognise, it's always interesting to see how they go in that sort of company. You know, no surprise that Liam Dawson would show how good he was in a run fest and in PE a couple of nights back. Richard Gleeson, who's out shopping for a deal, isn't he? Shopping for a contract at the moment. You know, bowled quickly, magnificently. Every time he's bowled outside of the power play, basically, he's looked sensational. You know, very dangerous indeed with changes of pace and extreme pace. You know, who else have we got? Tom Abel, that staggering piece of fielding from Tom Abel the other night, which please clip that up because I loved seeing it. Which was foiled by the laws of the game, quite rightly. Great spot by the umpire, by the way. But it was one of those where you just think, well, what advantage was gained by him clipping the advertising hoarding on the way out? And I know it's to stop people from starting off outside the boundary and diving back in and all that kind of stuff. But in that instance, it seemed as though the law was a bit of an arse. But that was staggering, and he then backed it up with a really good 60 coming in a tough old run chase. So yeah, I mean, one thing that it proves, I guess, and something that we've known for quite some time, is that England's talent pool below the international teams is still very strong in white ball cricket, and all of them have done themselves justice in it so far.
Still a few players I'm really intrigued to see if they get on the park. Sam Cooke's got a contract. He's someone who's done obviously brilliantly in red ball cricket, but in white ball cricket as well in recent years. And also John Turner, who still hasn't played a game of cricket since he was first called up by England back in August. So I really hope he gets on the park. You mentioned him one. Yeah, sorry, go.
No. It was about Sam Cooke. I mean, you know, Joburg Super Kings have kind of found themselves. I mean, I've just arrived in Joburg actually, and found themselves without a win from 3 games and one washout. And you know, there's a little bit of searching perhaps going to be going on there, so he might find himself getting a berth sooner rather than later.
You mentioned him once already, but Heinrich Klaasen's been the player of the tournament so far, and as you say, he's able to construct different types of innings, and he's someone who sort of has slowly crept up to become one of, if not the best middle order white ball players in the world. He is extraordinarily consistent in his belligerence. Yeah,
I mean, the consistency is one thing, particularly given, you know, his strike rate, which is up in the gods, isn't it? Over 170 through his T20 career. I think that's right. And you know, the innings he played on Monday evening on what was a really difficult pitch. I mean, it was a poor pitch. There's no getting away from that. But he went out there and basically played the odds and played them really well. And that wasn't something I'd expected to see from him, I'll be honest with you. Which is not to say that he hasn't done it before. I'd just not seen it, or not seen it when it was necessary. He went out there and, you know, all of his usual sort of cross-batted leg side shots over mid wicket, over square leg. He put them all away. He found a way to sort of still score at sort of 140 or something without taking any undue risk. And as a consequence of that, managed to get his team up to a score that was more than defendable on a tough pitch. And in the midst of it, of course, you're going to get the huge hits as well. He's phenomenally good. And you put the sort of ball striking power and all the rest of it that he has to possess and that he possesses, and you know, something that a lot of players in the world have. But you put that with a cricketing brain that can kind of understand situation, scenario, surfaces, what's a winning score, as opposed to always shooting for the moon and always, you know, coming off with the excuse of that's the way I play. You've got a very dangerous customer in your hands there, and you got sort of, you know, Nick Pooran in the middle order with him as well. Who the management seem to be, you know, pretty keen to kind of to hold back as long as they possibly can, and particularly there was the run chase against MI Cape Town where it just seemed ridiculous that they left it quite so late, and who knows what might have happened had the rain not come in there. But they're kind of quite happy to hold on to them and trust them to have the nous to manage the second half of the game without worrying about them featuring too much in the first half. Sorry, not the game, the innings. So yeah, we'll see if that strategy comes unstuck. But those two are dynamite for sure.
On the sort of condition-based nous that Clarkson has shown that he definitely has. I think of him and Miller compared to other guys who bat predominantly in the lower middle order in white ball cricket and T20 cricket in particular. There seems to be the way in which numbers 5, 6, 7 talk about batting in T20 cricket has become really 6 hitting based, and it's almost like a computer program that's played out in real life. You talk about your odds and you're not going to come off. It's accepted that you're not going to come off every time.
And you
look at
your matchups and they have to go no matter what and all the rest of it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And that was kind of why it was fun to watch him play that way, because it was a bit of a throwback in many ways, a throwback with a 140 strike rate. But it was a bit of a throwback in terms of the guy out there in the middle deciding that, okay, I could swing from the rafters and walk off and say that's the way I play, but he just decided, no, okay, there's a number here that we need to get to. My best chances of doing that are by putting away some of the extravagances and trying to find a way to get myself into a position where we can reach that number. It was old fashioned in its modernity, if you like, and all the more impressive for it.
Well, it's been brilliant to watch so far. I can't wait to watch the rest of it. Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week. The Under-19 World Cup starts this week. England will be looking to go one better than last time. There are a few familiar names in the England squad. There's Jayden Denley, the nephew of Joe, Hayden Mustard, son of Phil, Luke Benkenstein, son of Dale, and 15-year-old off-spinner Farhan Ahmed, the brother of Rahan. So lots of familiar names there to get behind. Another name to look out for, by the way, is Hamza Sheikh, who's 17. He's at Warwickshire, and he averages about 16 youth ODIs. He's got a brilliant youth record. I think he played a bit for Warwickshire in the One Day Cup last year as well. The tournament has been in the news for non-cricketing reasons as well. Host South Africa have taken the captaincy away from David Teager, citing security concerns following comments he made about the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Teager, who is Jewish, came under criticism after being quoted last year for praising Israeli soldiers in the early days of the conflict. Cricket South Africa claimed that they were worried about protests and violence during the upcoming Under-19 World Cup in South Africa. There's been a lot tweeted about and written about this story. I'd suggest if you're interested, I'd recommend reading a couple of pieces by South African journalist Fadouz Munda and Dan Gallen. You can find their pieces on their respective Twitter accounts. Moving on, county cricket. Will, you reported this week that Hampshire are in talks with the owners of the Delhi Capitals over a possible takeover, triggering words perhaps for quite a large section of county cricket fans. What does it actually mean? So if they do take over, will much tangibly change in the short term?
I doubt it. I don't think they're suddenly going to become the Hampshire Capitals. This group also have a stake in the Seattle Orcas, who aren't the Capitals. They play in the MLC. So I don't think they kind of, maybe it's the Hampshire Orcas, but I don't think too much will change tangibly. What's essentially happening is that people are probably aware that Rod Bransgrove is the kind of long-time chair at Hampshire and kind of widely credited with being the saviour of a club from the doldrums of the late 90s through to, having a quite fancy stadium and complex there, which has got an Ashes test from 2027. He's now stepped down as chair. He is also the majority owner of the club. I think his stake is worth something, sort of 65% of the club, and then there's a load of minor shareholders as well. He's going to sell up, basically. It was probably always quite likely when he stepped down as chairman that he would. And he's been, kind of working away over the last year or so. It's very difficult when we kind of, my colleague Nick Holt and I were doing this story. Not many people are able to say very much about it. But I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. And the Delhi Capitals have got two owners, one of whom owns the team in Dubai and one of whom owns a team in South Africa, I think it's Pretoria, isn't it? So they've got all sorts of little assets around the world. So Hampshire would be going to GMR, which is the one that owns the Dubai team, if my memory serves. It's only 6 days, I think, since I wrote a story, but I already can't remember. I think maybe we don't know exactly what the arrangements will be for private investment in the 100 yesterday, but this might be they might be giving themselves a bit of first mover advantage on the Southern Brave franchise. Obviously, they would be the majority owner of an Ashes venue, which is quite nice. There's also a cricket team there, and all sorts of golf course. It's quite an attractive prospect, for an investor, I think. Hampshire was valued, the whole business was valued at about 100 million last year, which when you think about the fact that when Manoj Badali, the Rajasthan Royals longtime owner, looked at buying Yorkshire last year, the figure then was about 25-30 mil, I think. So that shows what the state the two counties are in. Hampshire do have some debt, but they're also worth quite a lot more. So if I was a county fan, I wouldn't worry too much imminently about IPL franchises suddenly owning every team. 15 of the 18 are member owned still. The only three that aren't are Lawrence's beloved Northants, Durham, and Hampshire. So that's what makes Hampshire kind of not vulnerable is the wrong word, but it makes it a possibility for them. I do think more counties will look at not being member owned in time. I think counties are looking at investment. I mean, we know that Middlesex have got pretty significant financial difficulties. I think they would be very open to some investment, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have to not stop being the members could still remain the majority owners of the club, but you get some investment from a private company as well. So yeah, I don't think this is the sort of the thin end of a wedge. Well, certainly not immediately county wise, but obviously we do know almost for certain that private investment is coming very soon in 100.
Phil, at Essex, Dean Elgar signed a 3-year contract, which is a serious signing and probably as close as a like-for-like replacement for Alistair Cook as you're going to get.
Yeah, it's a good coup. It's a long contract for a player into the second.
I think,
it's the second half of his 30s. Nonetheless, you'll know that he'll eke out every last ounce of his talent for 3 years and give everything he's got. And that's what they need, really. The pitches at Chelmsford are quite peculiar in that sometimes they're flat and lifeless and it's a ball draw, and other times they're spicy. But he's made a career out of playing on those sort of divergent pitches. He's
probably one
of
the best
amazing
spicy
pitch
pitch batters in the world. Yeah,
I think it was like a 90 odd or an 80 odd at Joburg against India a few years ago in a game where they almost actually stopped it. Do you remember halfway through, towards the end of the third day, because they were thinking it was too dangerous? Well, he was absolutely stunning in that game, and he has a game which is set up for English county cricket. Plays it late, plays it soft hands, stays rooted in his crease, and it's a real coup for Essex. I thought he was going to go to Somerset, having believed that he was going to go to Essex because I'd heard rumours that he was going.
I think this totally comes from the commentators in the South Africa India series.
During his epic 100, they would just spent the whole thing. I watched quite a lot of it, and I was really enjoying watching him bat, and they were saying with absolute certainty that he's joined Somerset. And I was like, I thought he's joining. I'm pretty sure he's joining Essex.
Exactly
but
same,
Abel had just stepped down as captain. I was like, maybe he is. But they said it with absolute certainty. And then
So I'd spoken to Wesley towards the end of the season, and he said, we're going to sign a really, really brilliant player, brilliant test player. We're going to sign him. And I said, who is it? He said, well, I'm not telling you. I was like, go on. And he didn't. Presumably they'd had him in line, or, ink drying on the contract for perhaps quite a long time. They were perhaps waiting until the end of his test career. But yeah, big news for Essex, that really, and irrespective of allegiances, you want these smaller counties, these non-test match playing counties who do punch above their weight to hang in there, really, because it would be horrible if we have an entrenched tiered system in our game. So all power to them, really.
Given that they signed Jordan Cox as well, he's sort of a de facto Dan Lawrence replacement.
Really good sign.
To get Elgar as your Cook replacement as well is really good going, actually. From
you might have spoken about this the other week when I wasn't on, but I saw that Sam Cooke gave an interview to somebody or other who I should be able to reference. It's you, murmuring about Red Bull cricket perhaps not being his long-term plan, and I guess that's inevitable, right? If you churn through the overs year after year, and they just shrug their shoulders to you, then I guess
think
that's how it goes.
I think what his read on the situation is that he does have a genuine shot of playing Test cricket still. Obviously, England have quite fancy these quicker, taller, actually slightly younger than him bowlers, even though he's only, I think he's 26, 20, yeah, something like that. They've got, they're looking at Atkinson and Tongue and these kind of characters. But I think he is looking at Anderson when Anderson does eventually go, if he ever goes. I think he sees that as that is his opening. And I think I probably agree with him in terms of shape and build and style. I think that's fair. But he's also quite strident about the schedule. I think he's done, I remember him emerging at the very end of the 2017 title in the run-in. He just suddenly popped at this lad from Loughborough.
He played
Uni,
in like in the televised game at the very end of the season.
Just suddenly emerged, and he was brilliant immediately.
He took 8 for 20, didn't he, against Lancashire?
And he's played 14 games a season pretty much ever since. He played 13 last year because he got a little niggle, and he said to me that he's quite vocal about the schedule, partly because he's a PCA rep, but also partly because of with his own interests in mind. And so I think he's dipping his toe in the franchise stuff this winter. He's with Joburg Super Kings at the moment. I don't think he's played yet, but he's quite interested in that world. He put himself forward for the IPL, but as happened with these things, he didn't get to the final. His name didn't actually appear up in the pot on the final day. But I think he's maybe started his career thinking he would be if he was going to play for England, it would be in Test cricket, and now he's kind of thinking, well, how else can I A, earn my money, but B, possibly press my England case as well. He's good white ball bowler as well, so he might be looking at that.
Another bit of overseas counter news. Lancs have signed the 32-year-old uncapped New Zealand batter Tom Bruce as an overseas signing for 2024. I saw someone tweet, a Lancashire fan said, are we just going to sign a balding Kiwi with a beard and 2 first names and expect no one to notice that it isn't Darren Mitchell then? I think it's potentially actually a very shrewd signing. So he's got
a really good record.
He's got an outstanding first-class record. And he's that sort of age where you can feasibly see how their career has been blocked by the guys ahead of them. Like he's only a year or so younger than Williamson. They obviously had a very settled middle order for a long time. And also next summer is particularly tough with the T20 World Cup taking place slap bang in the middle of the English summer to secure the services of an overseas player for the whole of the summer.
I just think with county overseas as well, even if they're a slight tier below, just get someone who can stick around. Just get someone who actually, gives a monkeys about the club and gets a bit invested. And it also plugs the gap for Lancs where Dane Villas has retired now. So it's straight into that role, which I think that looks quite a shrewd signing. And
they also have recent success of getting someone from New Zealand first class cricket who's not played international cricket. Will Williams had a similarly brilliant first class record, albeit with the ball. He's done a really good job for them since joining Lancs. Joe writes in to say, love the podcast. I started listening a couple of years ago during the Ashes Down Under at a time where I'd lost interest in the sport. I ended up listening to an episode whilst locked in a hotel room for COVID isolation, and it's fair to say your quality discussion and genuine passion for the game has reignited my love for cricket. Since I've been an avid listener of the podcast, I'm fully immersed in cricket again, so thank you for helping me bring me back to the game I love, which is very kind, but also, you must be the only English person to fall in love with cricket during that series. That was a tough watch. Anyway, unfortunately, I do have a bit of a bone to pick with the pod, with your hyperbole around this current Australia side. No doubt they are limited overs legends now, having had both White Ball World Cups recently. But there also seems to be this prevailing idea that they are a great test side. This is a side that has only won one away series in the last 9 years. They are a team full of players who will be regarded as Australia legends. I can't question that. However, unless they actually win series away from home, they do not belong in the discussion with other great test sides of years gone by. Winning a trophy where winning cricket matches is of less value than keeping up your over rate doesn't do much to change my opinion of them either. That's a cracking email, Joe. Lawrence, care to respond with the official Wisden line? Are Australia any good?
I don't think that's entirely unfair. I mean, I did sort of nail them a bit earlier on in the chat, saying I don't think they're the most interesting side to watch. It's a hard point to make because it's like, well, yeah, mate, we've got the Ashes. Is the champ is generally the response. They have great players. I think someone added up the wickets that Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood and Lyon have got together, and it's the biggest sort of quartet in the history of the game. They have an all-time great bowling attack. That is clear. In Smith, they have an all-time great batter. Warner has had his moments. Head is exciting, but look, they haven't won in England since 2001. They struggle to win in India. They keep retaining the Ashes on the basis of draws in England. They're obviously brilliant at home. They're not they're not in the class of the 48 Invincibles, the West Indies, the two Australian teams under Ponting and Waugh. Undoubtedly, they're not. They're a level below. They need to win in India, in England to make the next step. I would say
they're also now very old, aren't they? I mean, they've been desperate to get Green into the side because he's 24, I think. But everyone else is now. I think Head's just turned 30, so Lavishane's 29. Everyone else is in their 30s, and quite a lot of them are quite deep into their 30s as well. So that transition is interesting. I don't necessarily. You hear some names and look at scorecards and stuff. I don't necessarily see what the next gen looks like.
Especially in batting.
They're 2027, 25-6 Ashes. That's quite close actually now, even though we only just have a last one. But I think they look quite. They'll be similar to what we're used to. But 2027, I'd be more confident as an English person than I would be as an Australian person.
Fighting.
All I've got to say, I really like Smith opening the batting. For the ambition of it, because he could retire tomorrow and would be a great player. But if he can open the batting and have a couple of good series, a couple of really good series, having taken the route that very, very few players, top of my head, that I can think of, who have gone from the comforts of middle order to the pressure cooker of the new ball. If he can pull that off and create another chapter in his story, then that deepens the legend of Steve Smith, the Test match batter. So I really like what he's done there. Would have been very easy to say thanks, but no thanks. And I hope it works. Really, I hope it works for the story, for the narrative of him. We shall see.
Phil, there's a new magazine coming out in 2 days' time. What's in it? We've already heard about the Tom Hartley interview and the piece on young India batters.
Yeah. Well, normally, of course, Joe Harmon sits here next to me. My north, my south, my east, my west. And Joe has now moved to Ireland, to a craggy island somewhere on the western coast of Ireland. He's fallen in love, and it's beautiful things. But it does mean that this is a rather poignant thing for me, talking about our magazine, and having to do it solo. Sans Joe. What's in it? Loads of stuff.
Joe's not gone, by the way.
He's not gone, but he's still flown.
He'll be on some of the India dailies. He's coming back to London in a couple of weeks' time. He's not
I
gone.
mean, he's still been institutionalised. Don't worry about that. But he's no longer next to me physically. So what's in our magazine? Well, it's a definitive India series preview to begin with. As I mentioned, Adia's really superb piece. I interviewed Tom Hartley as part of the intro to the piece, but Anand Vasu as well, a storied writer, Indian writer, on the, if you like, the enigmatic, underappreciated Ravichandran Ashwin story. John Stern does a cracker on the India tour, the England tour of India in 84-5, when Gower took them out there, and it was a wild, crazy tour. Political assassinations and dodgy stomachs and all the rest of it. And Gatting made his first Test 100, and Foxy Fowler made a double alongside him, and they won at Chennai and somehow won the series. And John, whose piece is about famous moments in the past, they really are superb stuff, and so that really brings that to life. And various other bits and bobs. We look at the venues themselves and try and anticipate what kind of pitches we're going to get. There's different properties of pitches depending on which part of the country geographically you go to, and so we tried to unpick some of that and some player profiles in there as well. So that's that. Other things. Well, we picked selected the men's Test 11 for 2023 and the women's cross format 11 for last year as well. Put a panel together. All of us were in it. maybe 30 odd names, so-called experts, picking their 11s from last year. Some interesting names thrown out there. It's quite England, Australia heavy, but there's also an Irishman in there as well for the first time.
I've done that for a few years with you, and it's the hardest one ever.
It's
last
tough,
year.
yeah,
It was
because-
absolutely filthy, especially seamers.
Yeah.
Until the Aussies like picked up loads of really cheap wickets at the end of the year, the seamers were
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah.
I sent an apology to Joe when I selected the teams. I actually hated doing this.
Yeah, it's quite a tough one, but I'm not going to reveal who's in it. So, you'd have to find out by buying the magazine and all of that. Mel Farrell tracks down Michael Vaughan in Australia and speaks to him over a number of interviews, actually, and probably his most revealing and in-depth interview from the last few years. And he obviously has a lot to say about the state of the game and his own story as well. I try and unpick the Essex racism scandal. That was fun. Joe did the Chandiples as part of his superb procreation series, where he looks at cricketing families, if you like, and obviously Shiv and his boy and the father figure, the patriarch of the Chandiples, who's overseen both of their developments. And so he manages to get some interviews with them and some stunning photographs as well from Shiv's house in Guyana. That's a beautiful piece of work. And a personal favourite, actually, is a new series by David Woodhouse. And David Woodhouse is the author of Who Only Cricket Know, the story of Hutton's tour of the West Indies in 1954-5, which won all the awards, basically, last year. It's a brilliant piece of work. And he is beginning a new long series. It's going to run for a year or two, looking at the 50 cricket books that tell the true story of the game. And the first piece that he wrote in this magazine is more of an intro to the whole thing. But he picks a Poet Laureate 11 and a Nobel Laureate 11 based on great writers who have been obsessed with the game or entwined with the game, if you like. And he's trying to write a quote, trying to nail the curious symbiotic relationship between cricket and the writing of good English. And there's some marvellous little tidbits just in this piece. My favourite line is probably from Carol Ann Duffy, who's batting 10 in his Poet Laureate 11. And this is her. And when Beefy fell sick in the final test, I stepped up 2 of his boxes over my chest. What a great line that is. But there's stuff on Beckett, Churchill got in there. We had a game of cricket this afternoon. I hit a tour, as the expression goes. My first runs this year. That's when he was a fag at Harrow. Yeah, all kinds of great stuff. There's a brilliant line from J.M. Coetzee, the fabulous South African writer of Disgrace and various other things. There's obviously the Pinter line that everybody knows. I tend to think that cricket is the greatest thing that God created on earth. Certainly greater than sex, although sex isn't too bad either. Even mentions Doris Lessing, who I read a book of hers the other day, actually, called The Good Terrorist. Anyway, she was reportedly propositioned by Wally Hammond on an MCC tour, Rhodesia, where she was from. So it's all kinds of good stuff in there, and that's going to be a series running on from here on. So, all the fun of the fair. And all the things that Joe's remembered that he's not here to tell us about.
I was going to say, Joe really wanted to be on this podcast, but obviously couldn't make it. As always, you can get the latest magazine from wisden.com/shop. That is it for today's show. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Will. Cheers, Lawrence. And remember, folks, you can get Bazball, the Bazball book, at all good bookshops.
Very much so. And some bad ones.
Well, that is everything for today. Cheers, everyone. Cheers for listening. We will be back next week for our final India-England preview show.